final episode of Better Call Saul not only concluded the spin-off series itself, but also concluded the entire Breaking Bad universe. How? The answer is the implied sense of closure between the main characters, Mike Ermantraut, Chuck McGill, and Walter White. When Saul Goodman mentions time travel, he is not only asking each of the characters to learn if they have any regrets, but also to confess his insecurities and regrets indirectly. The idea of time travel provides us revelations, insights into all of their deepest regrets. An interpretation of the final episode is that it represents a final goodbye for us, as the audience, before the characters parted ways canonically. In Mike Ermantraut's final scene, we return to the time when Jimmy had to transport Lalo Salamanca's bail money from the border to Albuquerque. When Saul was with Mike, he asked that if Mike had a time machine. Mike answered with a specific date, possibly referring to Matt's death, in which Mike decided to exact revenge for Matt's murder. Then he interjected himself, no, and instead talked briefly about his first time accepting a bribe, wishing he did not take it since it led him into a life of crime. Mike's time machine reveals that although Mike worked under Gus and chose to enter a life of crime for his family, the truth was, by taking the bribe for himself, protecting his family was an excuse to be a criminal. Next, Walter White. The episode presents a flashback to a scene where Walter White and Saul Goodman hide away together and change their identities to avoid arrest. Saul asked Walter the same question about time travel, to which Walter replied that he wished he had never sold the stock of his company, otherwise he would not be hunted.
Regrets?
Yeah.
My regrets. Alright, well. My regrets.
Saul asked Walter the same question about time travel, to which Walter replied that he wished he had never sold the stock of his company, otherwise he would not be hunted. This reveals that Walter entered a life of crime to boost his ego and to cope with the tragic loss of his career, since he missed the opportunity. This summarizes his motive throughout the entire Breaking Bad series, since he, like Mike, supposedly did it for their family, when, in reality, Mike and Walter did it for themselves. They both realized in the end that entering a life of crime was a selfish act, regardless of good and wholesome intentions. Next was Chuck McGill. This episode flashes back to Chuck himself. Chuck tells Jimmy that it is not too late to change his past. It was the final flashback before Jimmy entered the courtroom, in which he unexpectedly divulged his whole criminal history before the judge. In a sense, these flashback scenes were the culmination of Jimmy's thought processes, reflecting on the character's answers to not suffer the same fate of death and to not hold on to these regrets when they pass away. Chuck McGill's dialogue in the flashback scene was the last thing Jimmy recalled about turning over a new leaf, the last memory that gave him the incentive to make a proper confession and to take accountability. Also, by considering his brother's advice, you could say that he reconciled with his brother because it was the first instance he took Chuck's words to heart, despite him being no longer with us. Although Jimmy was locked away for 80-some years, it does not feel like a sad ending, but a satisfying one. Kim Wexler gets back into law, and Jimmy serves his time. By admitting his faults instead of running away, Jimmy ultimately absolves Kim Wexler of guilt. In the final scene, they give each other a final look of intimate silence before parting ways. Goodbye, Jimmy McGill. Goodbye, Saul Goodman. Goodbye, Better Call Saul. And goodbye, Breaking Bad.